Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Sunday night, December 2nd, 2018. And tonight's topic is a follow-on from last night's topic. We discussed last night whether a gold standard was a good idea. And tonight's topic is I'm going to talk about the case for the gold standard. And this is in response to a comment I got last night from Sarah Issels. He said, "It is very good that Luis has presented a critique of the gold standard. It reveals a great deal about his understanding and basic assumptions about economics. Luis thought himself very wise and destroyed many straw man arguments for the gold standard. And I admit I'm a bit offended that he thought his viewers had never considered the implications of the gold standard. Luis did not reference or attempt to refute any of the great economic defenses of the gold standard." And then she cites What Has Government Done to Our Money by Murray Rothbard and The Causes of Economic Crisis and Other Essays by Ludwig von Mises. So I thought tonight we would go through some of these supporting documents and talk about the proponents of the gold standard, proponents of gold as money, and proponents of competing currencies and so on. Before we do that, let's take a look at what's going on in the markets. Now we do have the gold markets are open, but they are flat as can be. 1221.50, that's down 60 cents. Silver at $14.20. The big shakeup is in the equity markets and the futures markets, and that is a result, I believe, of some supposed deal with China that apparently Trump may or may not have worked out with the Chinese. Now it looks like there's this 90-day period where they got to figure everything out. So, but again, we've talked about this. Any excuse to rally, and you'll get a rally. And it looks like the futures, Dow futures are up over 400 points. S&P futures up over 40. NASDAQ over 125. So those are all about 1.5% to 2%. So they're up more than just a little bit. Up more than a little bit. And now let's take a look at the cryptos. The cryptos, where are they going? Oh, they're down a little bit. Bitcoin at 44,073, down 2.5%. Ethereum, same thing, down 114, 2.5%. Bitcoin Cash, down to about 170, down 2%. And Litecoin at 33, down about a little under 3%. Coming up on Smaulgld, I've decided that that week in review is so long that I have to break it into pieces. So next week I'm going to put out, or starting tomorrow, a number of smaller videos. I have the Kazakhstan gold reserve numbers for October. They're pretty stunning there. I have a report on crypto regulations and the status thereof. And another report on the crypto prices and what's driving them. Then I've got an analysis of Trump versus China, Trump versus the Ninth Circuit Federal Court, and Trump and his tariffs, and then also Trump versus Mueller. So be on the lookout for those. I may or may not do those as live streams. It might make sense maybe to hit some of those. Maybe I'll do the Kazakh one pre-recorded, and then maybe I'll do the Trump ones live, or any combination thereof, but we'll see how that goes. All right, what I want to do now is go into, let's see what we got in the audience tonight. I got to keep an eye on the streamer. I can't look at the audience and the streamer at the same time, and then I find out I'm cut off, but I think I'm still on, so let's take a look at who's joined us this evening. Let's see what we got here. We've got some people here. GSGS is here. Hello. De La Villa is here. Hello. Pablo Pina. Hello. I received my Smaulgld mug in the mail today, finally. I'm feeling like a game changer. Well, that's interesting, because I received from Pablo today very interesting photograph of a very interesting and very beautiful dog. His name is Lucky, and he is a big fan of the Smaulgld Game Changer mug. Let's take a look. I think we've got a picture of him somewhere. Let's take a look where he is. And there's Lucky. Lucky's a lucky dog to have Pablo as an owner. Look at that. That's got the awe effect, doesn't it? Got those eyes looking at you at one side. He's got his paw guarding the Smaulgld mug. So that truly is a game changer right there. That's Lucky with his mug. Also, just to give you a little insight here, what else do we got going on tonight? All right, let's get into these books about money and gold. Now, I want to start with, look at that one. That one's upside down. Well, I'll show it to you that way anyway. There you go. That is Murray Rothbard on its head, or on its side. What has government done to our money? Now, the reason this book is important, it really doesn't advocate for the gold standard as such. It advocates for, basically, a free market in what people determine they wish to use as money. And historically, that has been, through Rothbard's lifetime, a gold and silver. And he makes the point that I make all the time. Silver pretty much is pocket change, and gold is the real store of value. But that oftentimes there's bimetallism, and that silver just doesn't go away because it is desired and is used as money. And then he talks about, in the book, does a free market actually provide a standard? And he says the important thing is that the standard not be imposed by government decree. And again, something I was talking about last night. I don't like the idea of the government telling the people we're picking gold and we're pricing it at X, Y, or Z, or Z, as they say in the British Commonwealth. And he says, if left to itself, the market may establish gold as a single money, which would be a gold standard. But again, not a government gold standard. It would be a de facto gold standard, or silver as a single money, or perhaps likely both as monies with freely fluctuating exchange rates. That's your parallel standards, or your, I guess you would call it a bimetallic standard. And then he talks about what I had hit on. I thank him for bringing this up, because it's a good refresher here. I was talking about how you're going to store the gold and so on, and then who's going to make the money. And government can make the money in making coins, but that's just like roads. It's not like a private entity can't make coins, but the government takes upon itself to make the gold. And then he talks about, and this is a very good, but the reason this is a very good book is he talks about money and how it works before you even talk about economics, meaning the science in which there's intervention. So Murray Rothbard, you have to realize, is what's called an anarcho-capitalist. And he believes that there's a free market, private solution for everything. Not just money, but police, fire, road making, self-defense, whatever it is, that you don't need the government, that the government is not going to work. Now, the interesting thing about Rothbard was he was engaged in the political process, though. He, like Lysander Spooner, also an anarchist, did believe in voting. A lot of modern anarcho-capitalists and anarchists do not believe in voting. They think that it's part of the aggression. It's against the non-aggression principle, because you're voting to make somebody do something else. You know, that whole, you're delegating a right to someone else, that you don't have the right to do it. But the way Lysander Spooner analyzes it, and I'm sure Murray Rothbard would agree, that some voting is what you call defensive voting, in that if they're going to do something to you, if the government is going to do something to you, and one candidate says they're going to do that, i.e. raise your taxes, draft you or your sons or daughters, and you vote for the other person, well, then you're voting in defense. You're not aggressing against anyone. But I digress. But it's all tied together, because when you start looking at money and gold, and you just start thinking gold's going to save everything, it's not. And we're going to get to Ron Paul's case for gold, but all of this has to do with the rule of law and what the role of government is in protecting your rights or providing you with stuff. I mean, there's a big philosophical difference there. Is the government there to serve you, or is the government there to protect you from others, to protect your life and your property? And that's what the founding fathers, the Constitution, believe. Small government protects you from the tyranny of the majority. That's why it's a democratic republic. And in a sense, safeguards you against the tyranny from the government itself. And that's what the purpose of the Bill of Rights is. Well, the reason you have First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, and so on are to protect you against government intrusion, not from private people telling you what to do or searching your house. It's basically the government can't search you without reasonable cause. The government can't tell you what you can and cannot say, and so on. So a lot of this philosophy has to do with, when you say you want a gold standard, most people mean they want the government to say the gold is now the standard because we say so, in a sense, by fiat. I don't think people catch on to that. They think that, well, it's a gold standard and it's what I want and the price is going to go higher. So to a certain extent, Sarah's point that I was knocking down straw man is somewhat true, but not really. I think even the people that advocate the gold standard, and I don't think Murray Rothbard actually advocated a gold standard. He advocated the free will of the people to choose gold, and also he made many points about why gold and why private citizens can handle all of this on their own, where you don't really need. But he does understand that out of monetary chaos, as he called it, after World War I, that governments do get together and they make these agreements like the Bretton Woods agreements. And he talks about the Bretton Woods agreement. He says, the new international monetary order was conceived and then driven through by the United States at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. We talked about that last night. And then Congress ratified it basically at the end of the war in July of 1945. And then he says the new system was essentially the gold exchange standard of the 20s, but with the dollar rudely displacing the British pound. Again, that's that dollar standard concept, meaning that the dollar is to be backed by gold. He makes the point, no private individuals, only governments were allowed the privilege of redeeming dollars in world gold currency. We're going to see what Ron Paul has to say about that. When he proposed a gold standard in 1982 as part of the Minority Report of the U.S. Gold Commission, commissioned by Reagan, he was for people having the right to redeem their specie, their dollars for specie. So Rothbard did not necessarily, endorse a gold standard. He looked at the issues on how governments, similar to what I was saying last night, will break that gold standard, and they won't always have the discipline or even the authority to carry on. Because we saw in World War II, they abandoned the classical gold standard because they wanted to do a war. We saw with Nixon in 71, he realized it wasn't working out. You know, they got the short end of the stick. In the beginning, they were doing well when the U.S. was a exporting nation, most powerful on earth, wasn't running deficits. It's fine. But once it started doing that, the other countries came and got the gold, and then it wasn't fine. So if you have a system, and whether it's money or whatever it is, if the rule of law is not abided by, and there isn't a strong sense of moral leadership in the government officials and in the people, then it's really just to me, it's just words on a piece of paper that we must maintain gold. Because even when you had the gold standard, you had fractional reserve banking, you had all types of, you had fraud going on. So a lot of people think that the gold standard is somehow going to be this panacea. Now, it would be if, only if, I believe, let's move over to Ron Paul, if the gold standard was such that it was abided by, meaning that the government itself is bound by law. So here's what Ron Paul says in the case for gold. He says gold money is always rejected by those who advocate significant government intervention in the economy. And that's a great sentence. Bingo. What he's saying is, and that's exactly why I say China would never go for the gold standard. Why? China is the most interventionist, centrally planned government. So when people, I don't understand why these people keep saying gold's back, yuan, game changer. It's the last thing China would want to do. If you have a gold standard, by definition, hinders you from intervening. You're bound by how much gold you have. That's the last thing they'd want to do. So he says, and these are the points for the gold standard. This is on page 174 of the Case for Gold. Gold holds in check the government's tendency to accumulate power over the economy. Again, a solid reason for the gold standard. But again, only as good as the government's willing to abide by the law and be held in such check by the gold. Paper money is a device by which the unpopular programs of government intervention, whether civilian or military, foreign or domestic, can be financed without tax increases that would surely precipitate massive resistance by the people. So what he's saying is you can create inflation, or you can pay for stuff just by paying for stuff without having to go and ask the people for the money. You take it from them by inflating the paper supply, which, again, great point for the gold standard, you can't do under a gold standard. If the gold isn't there, you ain't got it. So they create the debt. And then he says monetizing massive debt is more complex and therefore more politically acceptable. Now he wrote this in 1982. He had no idea of the QEs that were going to follow in 2008 and 9 and 10 and 11. But it's just as harmful, he says. In fact, more harmful than if the people were taxed directly. He says monetizing debt is literally a hidden tax. It is unevenly distributed through the population, one segment paying much more than the other. It's equivalent to a regressive tax for forcing the working poor to suffer more than the speculating rich. This is written in 1982, and you can see it exactly what happened. Excuse me, QE created a massive wealth effect. It sure did, thank you, Bernanke and Yellen, but for people, as we talked about last night, that have assets. By the way, let me show you Ron Paul's book while we're showing pictures here. It's show and tell here. You got Murray Rothbard upside down. This picture looks better. It's even in... Nope, this one's upside down too. I don't know why. But there's Ron Paul. That's what I'm reading from there. So he's saying that essentially monetizing debt and doing this money printing is equivalent to a regressive tax, forcing the rich to gain more, the speculating rich, than the working poor. And that's what we saw happen as well. Then he says deliberately debasing the currency for political reasons, that is, paying for programs that the politicians need in order to get reelected, is the most immoral act of a government short of deliberate war. These are all very powerful sentences. They're very true. But the question is, since politicians are the ones that want to use government intervention, want to use quantitative easing, want to make promises that they can't keep other than taking from the people and say, here, I'm going to give it back to you. They want to be able to say, we're getting you something for nothing, and people not realizing how they're doing it. Well, then why would those same politicians vote to restrain themselves in the fashion that Ron Paul says? He's absolutely right. But what politician that wants to get elected is going to say, how about we do this and you guys get nothing? Most people don't understand the concepts of freedom, don't understand the type of money that he's talking about, and they won't go for it. So he basically makes a lot of great cases, a lot of great points in this book. It's worth reading cover to cover. But I come back to the point is, why would a government, and you say, well, they'll be forced to, but forced to by whom? Then he says, and this gets back to what I was saying about the moral leadership, and again, it's lacking. You have to admit it's not strong. He says, money, when it's the result of moral commitment to honesty and integrity, will be trusted. Bingo star. He's absolutely right. That he says, trustworthy money is required in a moral society. Getting back to the moral. Remember, you don't have anything if you don't have laws that are abided by and that are enforced by moral people. And you see that. You can think of examples right now of what's going on. You have to have, it's not enough to say, we have a gold standard, and gold is going to be worth X amount of money, and we're going to be rich. You need a government that is moral, that protects the rule of law, and where everybody understands what that rule of law is, knows its parameters, and is applied equally. Otherwise, a gold standard is, I don't even know what it does. No one, they wouldn't, I would think, for example, if China were to institute a gold standard, they'd be off in 3 minutes. Oh, that doesn't work? Oh, okay, well, gold standard, no, we're not going to have it for this purpose. So he says then, this requires all paper money and all paper certificates to be convertible into something of real worth. Basically, he's saying that paper money isn't trustworthy, no matter how trustworthy the government is. It's still, unless you can turn it into something, it's not trustworthy. Throughout history, money has repeatedly failed to maintain trust due to unwise actions of governments whose responsibility it was to protect that trust, not destroy it. Again, spot on. Without trust in money gained by moral commitment to integrity, again, moral integrity, a productive economy is impossible. Now, you say, whoa, wait a minute. What about all the big gains we've made over the last 20, 30 years since Ron Paul? Well, we talked about this last night as well. It's not really a productive economy. It is an economy in which the prices of assets are rising much faster than the productive output of the country. We saw last night that the GDP has gone up 25% in 10 years, the total GDP value from 14 trillion to 18 trillion, but the stock market has gone up threefold. So he's right there too, that unless you have that trust in the money, you get what he calls the wealthy speculators driving up those asset prices. Inflation premiums built into the interest rates cannot be significantly altered by minor manipulations in the growth rate of the supply of money, nor by painful decreases in the demand for money brought on by a weak economy. Only trust in money can remove the inflation premium from our current financial transactions. That is true. And then here's what he says, and this is, I'm sorry, this is Shrek. That's never going to happen. Trust is only restored when every citizen is guaranteed convertibility of money substitutes into tangible money at will. False promises and hopes cannot substitute for a moral commitment to society to honest money, ingrained in the law and not alterable by the whims of any man. Well, no truer words spoken, but you show me where there is a moral commitment of a society to honest money ingrained into the law and not alterable by the whims of any man. Politicians, by definition, are driven by the whims. And that is what they do. That is how they get elected, and the populace expects that. So when I hear this idea, or the gold standard that's going to fix everything, I say good luck getting anyone, any politician, to endorse it and to enforce it. Now, there's also, I'm sure this one's going to come up sideways too. Mises is also very good. Now, the difference between Ron Paul and Murray Rothbard is Ron Paul is asking for a moral government. Murray Rothbard would never ask for anything out of government. So Ron Paul's case is even harder because he's saying we need this and the government needs to provide it, and we need to trust the government, and we need to trust the government's money. Murray Rothbard would say that was naive. You're not going to, there you go, another sideways book. This is Ludwig von Mises. His book is a bit more dense. It's called The Theory of Money and Credit, and he does a similar deep dive into essentially the theories of how money comes about, why people use it, and so on. If I'd recommend a book, if you're limited in time, What Has Government Done to Our Money is a much easier book to read. Rothbard is somewhat of a, I would say, a street corner philosopher. I wouldn't think of him in the same way that Mises is like a professor. Rothbard is just as smart. It's just that they have different styles. He's not a professor. He can explain it to you in layman's terms, whereas Mises is a bit dense. And I think Mises also, he managed to write this in English when I think German is his first language. Came from Austria. All right, so that's Rothbard is an anarcho-capitalist. Mises is he's still for government, but he's a non-interventionist. And he's written a lot of books on how government intervention can screw up a lot of things. But definitely worth a read, The Theory of Money and Credit. Ron Paul is Mr. Constitution. Ron Paul believes in a government that's moral, just, and its leaders are moral and just. And they're there to protect property rights and individual liberty, but they're not there to give you anything. If they're going to do anything, they're going to do things like provide sound money. And unfortunately, it's the old James Madison, if men were angels, you wouldn't need all this stuff. But the problem is we don't have many angels in politics, in the treasury, in all of these positions to defend sound money. And I think that now the reason that Ron Paul's case for gold got rejected, there was some support for it. There wasn't a lot for it, but the economy had started to get better by the time the report came out, and in 1982, mainly because the business cycle had run out. Volcker had raised interest rates to 19%. Reagan was in, and by then they just gave up on the idea. The good news out of the case for gold is you did get the American Silver Eagle and the American Gold Eagle out of that. It was one of the recommendations in the commission report, and they began production of the American Gold and Silver Eagle in 1986. And that was the first time the U.S. had printed silver coins. Well, they did make a 1982 commemorative George Washington silver coin, but the first time they minted silver coins since 1964, 1965. They did make some 1964 dated coins well into 1965. The first time they minted gold coins since 1933. So there was some good that came out of the Gold Commission Standard. Now, the last book I wanted to mention is Hayek's Denationalization of Money. And this is something Ron Paul is in favor of. I mean, he's similar. While he wants a gold standard, he also wants the idea of having competing monies. And all the authors talk about how competition in money is a free market principle. Just as commodities, you compete for prices on commodities. Gold is a commodity, silver is a commodity, and then you make it into money because it suits your purpose. It has the properties of money, and thereby you could use it as a medium of exchange and a store of value. And what Hayek argued for, now Hayek wasn't an anarcho-capitalist. Hayek is for monetary policy, and at one point when Hayek and Milton Friedman and Mises were all up on Mont Pelion in Switzerland discussing the economic issues of the day, they were talking about some government intervention, and it caused Mises to storm out of the fireside chat they were having and calling them all a bunch of socialists because he didn't believe in all this monetary policy and government intervention similar to Rothbard, although Rothbard was even more outside of the idea that government would do anything. But now Hayek took the view that through competition you could figure out what the best money is. And it's a very interesting concept, and he mentioned that you would have, as Rothbard and Mises discussed, that government makes coins. Well, anyone can make coins. Anyone can. This is before digital currencies, but anyone can make digital currencies and so on. He said there could be private money that could be well trusted, and that would be not very different from the trust on which today all private banking rests. Assuming there is trust in private banking, his words, or in the United States rested before governmental deposit insurance scheme, exclamation point, he says. So he had that little aside, caught himself saying, thinking the same thing I was thinking, is that, yeah, private money could be based on the trust, based on, I guess, the quality of the issuer. And he was trying to say it's the same with banks. You would trust your banks based on the quality of the bank. And then he was saying, you know, maybe before the government deposit insurance scheme. Then he says, people today trust that a bank, to preserve its business, will arrange its affairs so that it will at all times be able to exchange demand deposits for cash, even though they know that banks don't have enough cash to do so if everyone exercised their right to demand instant payment at the same time. So what he's saying is that the banks, you gain trust in the bank, even though you know they have fractional reserve banking. Why they allow that, who knows, but they do. You trust them because you know they manage their deposits correctly and they know how to avoid a bank run, I suppose, and they're properly capitalized, and therefore one bank might be deemed more sound than another. And he's saying the same thing. Under the proposed scheme, the manager of the bank would learn that its business depended on unshaken confidence. Remember, in all of these cases, whether it's a gold standard, whatever it is, people want to have confidence in their money. Now, of course, to me, I have more confidence in the gold, not in the idea that I can get gold from the government, as Ron Paul says, in exchange for my coupon, but that I actually have it. And you saw that with the gold standard under the Bretton Woods Agreement. There was a gold standard, but was there confidence that the signatory central banks could bring their warships into the harbor and get gold in exchange for their dollars? But again, that's a matter of confidence. But the ultimate confidence is specie in hand, not a promise to pay. Even if it's the promise to pay gold, that's not as good as having gold. That's the old, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So basically, Hayek enjoyed the idea of having many different issuers of currencies, and they could produce coins that could be considered as good, maybe even better than government-produced coins. You know, you have government-produced coins of 9995. You trust them. You don't trust the government, whatever it is. The U.S. government never had an issue with the trusting of it, and to this day still doesn't, to the trusting of the fineness of its minted coins. People may doubt the Fort Knox story. We've talked about that a few times. You may doubt the promises. You may doubt the ability to pay. You may doubt the amount of gold the U.S. has. But there's never been a serious doubt about what comes out of the U.S. Mint, I don't think, ever. And that's a good thing. But that doesn't mean that a private mint can't attain the same level of confidence. Now, this is all written before the advent of cryptocurrencies. But again, if people wished to transact in cryptocurrencies, and I think this is a point a lot of people miss, is they call it mark of the beast. Well, it's the exact opposite. Mark of the beast means you cannot transact unless you have such mark. That mark would come from people being forced to use a particular currency, right? But no one is forcing you to use Bitcoin because it's a private issuer. So a private issuer can create a system that people feel more comfortable with or more confidence in. Here's why. Let's say a government comes out and creates a cryptocurrency, and that cryptocurrency is fully authorized by the government and they force you to use it. Put aside the mark of the beast. The question is, do you have confidence in that currency? Well, A, it would depend on the issuer. Let's say it's some small island. Let's say it's Palau in the Asian islands off the coast of China. And you say, well, I don't know anything about that issuer. And then I don't know anything about the quality of the blockchain, how resistant to hacking it is. So now you've got two issues, the issuer and then the technology behind it. Now with Bitcoin, you don't have that issuer issue because there isn't really an issuer. And you have more confidence, perhaps, in the decentralized aspect of the whole ecosystem, that you'd feel more comfortable taking a Bitcoin, perhaps, than something from a government. I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, through Hayek's view, you would have private currencies competing alongside with government currencies. So I think they're good arguments for the gold standard. In fact, I'm for it. The reason I'm against it is that I don't think there's any country on earth today that has what Ron Paul talks about, the moral and the integrity, ability to put this to put it into place and to actually stick with it. And actually, it's not because people are more immoral today than they used to be. I think, look, they abandoned the gold standards in the past. When it becomes inconvenient, people flee. And that's generally what happens. They got rid of the gold standard once, then they got rid of it again. Nixon got rid of it, different type of gold standard in 1971. And I think today, no one even thinks about a gold standard, so no one would really think about restraining themselves in such fashion. But I do want to thank Sarah Issels for bringing up the issue, and then let's see what you guys have been saying, or if you're still there. All right, Miss De La Ville received 2 15-ounce mugs yesterday. Very nicely packed, really well. Mug-tastic. So Pablo got his mug, and De La Ville got her 2 15-ounce mugs. You got the well, those must be, you know, those are my favorite. Those mugs are the frosted mugs, and they really are beautiful. And you got them for a good price. I remember. I think they were 60% off. They were like $11, less than $11. Really nice mugs. They don't look as good in the picture. The beer stein looks a lot better, but they're both very nice looking mugs indeed. Let me show you. Maybe you'll like them if you see them again in the picture. Oh, I can't even find. I got so many pictures here. There's a dog again. Lucky. Here's the frosted mug. I'll show you the frosted mug. We'll leave the frosted mug up there. Might make you thirsty. All right. Mintmark SI. The futures are up 400 points. Looks like it's game over this time for sure. Well, here's the other thing. I see all these bears, and they are stunned at how the market is resilient. They have to realize that it's, as Mises says, there's intervention going on. It's obvious. But that is part of the market now. You have to count on this intervention. It's incessant, and it is going to create market imbalances. But the point is, people keep thinking, well, but it's always at some point. Well, maybe not. Well, everything is at some point. But the idea that these central banks have been able to boost stock values for 10 years, as I mentioned last night, threefold, while the economy itself has only grown 25%, shows you what their intervention can do. So why do you keep betting against it? Well, at some point, unsustainable. Yeah, and that's why I keep talking about the crypto bubble. I think that's what they're going to do next. They may think there's a limit to how much they can boost markets. Well, then they'll just boost something else that's even easier to boost. Cryptocurrencies out of thin air. ICOs. Pablo Pina, I went directly to Smaulgld to get my personal letter from Lewis, the game changer himself. His mug is backed by coffee. Yes, and on the Smaulgld site, you can get coffee. You can buy your mugs there, and you can also get precious metals, gold, silver, game-changing platinum, palladium from SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, Golden Eagle Coins. Golden Eagle Coins has those, I think I got 10 different cryptocurrencies and 999 silver, representations of cryptocurrencies and silver coins. Those are really cool, and I get a small commission on all that. So check out smaulgld.com, SMAULGLD. Andrew says he should receive his this week. All right, everyone's getting their mugs. Get those mugs. Smaulgld mugs are game changers. Measure your wealth in mugs. Stack your mugs. Let's see what else we got. Here's the coin I'm telling you about. These are the Bitcoin and Litecoin. I think these are beautiful, but look at that. Bitcoin and Litecoin in a 1 ounce. They're silver coins. Price, pretty decent price. A little bit of a premium, but not that much. They're still worth for their silver value, but of course, nothing beats the full ability to have your Smaulgld mug and your preps, and that would be your Mountain House. You can put Mountain House in a mug, in either a super classic or classic mug, and there they are. All right, let's see what else we got. Andrew Prashanti Girl is here, mailed in Canada. Pablo got his mug. Yes, he did. Real life game changer. Yes, his dog is there. You know, they even make, let me show you this. If you have a dog and you really want to spoil it, your dog, you can You can get a, I don't have the picture. You can have a dog t-shirt made. A Smaulgld dog t-shirt if you want your dog to be a game changer. Pablo Pinius, I did receive my mugs. Bottoms up. Aquaculture, yeah. Did you hear about Canada Post banning shipments of gold? I heard that, but I was listening to Salivate Metal. Greetings all. And he was saying, the way I was looking, I got to go and look at the document. It sounds like you can get exemptions, and there's certain people who send it out are not going to be restricted by it, but I'd like to take a look. I was listening to Salivate Metal, but I wasn't I didn't get a chance to read the actual new change to the law. All right, hey Pablo, enjoying the mug. Yes, he is. Let's see what else. We got a lot of questions here. Okay. Let's see. I want to get to them. Got to get away from the mugs. Talking about the mugs just a little bit too much. Lucky. Okay. All right. Lewis, advocate for the gold standard. Caffeine addicted dog. Huge fan. Puppy dog eyes. Yes, very nice. Pablo, I need another mug. He doesn't want to share. I wouldn't try to take that mug from Lucky. Let's get Lucky back up on the board again. We'll leave him up to the end of the show. Lucky's my favorite dog tonight. Very fine animal. Let's see. What does he say? Lucky. There he is. Look at that Doberman pincher. He's good to go. All right. Lucky does not like photos. Why his eyes like that? He's turning his head there. He's trying to show his good side, it looks like. Likes his right profile there. Aquaculture. Most of the individuals that have control of the financial decisions that affect the mass majority of people are unelected. Well, that's it too. So what do they care? Let's see. Max is here to say hi. Prashanti girl, we haven't had moral leadership for a century. Well, there you go. Aquaculture. Yeah, China has too much U.S. treasury. They're probably loving when the U.S. dollar goes up. Yeah, and they'll have to sell those if they have to, but there's no way they're going to go to a gold standard. There's not enough gold in the world at the current price to even cover the hundreds of trillions of dollars of debt that just the sovereign nations have. The value of the gold above ground isn't worth that much. Yep, they're a creditor nation and hold the surplus. Let's see. What's up with platinum prices? No idea. Funktard for Sally. What's up with palladium prices? The whole thing is nuts. That's probably what's up, says Aquaculture. Aquaculture, I think we have the opposite. The military-industrial complex is to enforce the rule of law for the U.S. dollar. Yes, but that allows the U.S. dollar then to be abused and debased and not have the normal market reaction to the dollar, you see? Because they enforce it, but they enforce it, you could argue, immorally. Because if you go against markets, well, if the natural reaction against debasement of a currency would be to distrust it and to get rid of it, but then you force people not to do so, you could argue that's not showing moral leadership. All right, let's see what else we got. We will democratize any terrorist contract without a Ross. It's kind of naive. Aquaculture. I agree that's kind of naive, Ron Paul, but I like Ron Paul. Well, yes, but you can tell he knows. He used to vote a lot on bills, and he'd be the only one voting against it. My one that I like about Ron Paul, it's not that I don't think he's naive. I think he's idealistic. I think he knows that in some ways he's just spitting in the wind when he was in Congress. But I remember once there was a time they wanted to give Mother Teresa a medal. And he was like, well, she's a fine lady. You want to give her a medal, pay for it yourself. There's nothing in the Constitution that says I got to give Mother Teresa a medal. So he knew he was on his own. But that was respectful because he wouldn't do something if he thought it wasn't in the Constitution or wasn't constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution explicitly that says that Congress shall give medals to people out of the country. Stock markets are run with computers. Computers are controlled by people. Okay. I guess greed controls these people. Now, I think you're mixing apples and oranges here. Funktard says Gaddafi tried to create a currency backed by gold. What happened to him? Well, yeah, I guess if you're going back on the comments, yes, if that's the United States enforcing that what money is the dollar and not gold. But I think a mistake a lot of people have is that if they try that if someone likes gold that they're moral. That's not true. I think as they get like China's your gold buddy because they have a lot of gold. So we're just going to forget that the entire economy is top-down run. They have social credit scores, a surveillance state. They got concentration camps in the Muslim section. I mean, gold, again, that's why I say it's too narrow of a focus. If you think gold itself makes you smart, makes you moral, it doesn't. Gold's just it's an element. It's shiny and it can be used as sound money. But there's a lot of wackos that like gold too. So it's not like gold makes. I hear all the time, oh, they like gold, they are smart. No, they're not necessarily smart or moral just because they like gold. Another one. We're going to do this tomorrow night, but only because you raise this up. JFK wanted to end the Fed. What happened to him? No, he did not. Absolutely. JFK liked the Fed. I know this sounds shocking to you because you've probably seen a lot of YouTube game changer end game videos. Absolutely not. I've done the research on it. John F. Kennedy not only was against silver, he was for Federal Reserve notes. He was for ending that. John Kennedy certainly had enemies in what we would call today the deep state. He clearly pissed off the CIA. He clearly was, in some respects, a danger to the deep state. He was having affairs left and right. He did not provide support to the Cubans for a CIA Cuban invasion operation. But the evidence on what happened with the silver certificates, the issuance of those, what you call U.S. notes. I've done the research. Those U.S. notes were not a Kennedy creation. They were invented or they were passed in 1878, the U.S. notes. All Kennedy was doing by issuing those was re-upping the number that needed to be issued. He wasn't directly challenging the Fed. He actually wanted the U.S. to demonetize silver. He gave speeches in Congress. I have the exact wordings that he gave against silver. He was the first Democrat to be against silver since the silver Democrats were always for silver. And he didn't get shot. And then the United States never issued U.S. notes again. Why? Because Johnson issued them too in 1967. And they were finally stopped, I think in the early 80s, issuing U.S. notes. John Kennedy never issued any direct or indirect challenge to the Fed. That's not to say he didn't issue challenges to the deep state, but the Fed, that whole story about he got killed for challenging the Fed is complete and utter nonsense. And it's based on cherry-picked facts and not all the facts. I'll go through all of it tomorrow. Don't have time to go through it tonight. But I've done two blog posts on that one, very long, all the footnotes and everything. All right, but see, once people believe, you start to believe this stuff. You start to believe that everything that happens is some kind of, it all ties together, and you're willing to believe then J.P. Morgan has 800 million ounces of silver. You're willing to believe Goldman Sachs killed Bambi. You just believe anything. Oh, look at, see, Kennedy, he was against the Fed. They killed him too. No, yeah, you could say anybody killed Kennedy. Everyone, his wife could have had him killed. Why? She's been cheating on her left and right. She couldn't take it anymore, so she hired a hitman. I mean, there's so many people that could have killed Kennedy. My belief is that it was most likely something to do with the CIA and the mafia. And the reason I think that is the mafia was big in Cuba. The mafia was big in helping the law enforcement during World War II. There were a lot of ties between the mafia and the government. John Kennedy's dad was in the mafia. He ran booze for the mob in the 30s. He was a bootlegger. He then became the first chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission. Clearly was this inside thing going on. Kennedy, his father, and John, they were all tied in with Sinatra and all this. There was all that kind of stuff going on, and Cuba was where the mob hung out. And it was perfect. The U.S. was against communism. And, of course, the mob was against communism because it tossed them out of Cuba. So I think there was a lot to do with possibly those motives. But with the Fed, nothing to do with the Fed. Absolutely nothing to do with the Fed. In fact, it's the opposite. Kennedy was notorious for not knowing the difference between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Remind me which is which. He was not like a anti-Fed crusader. He didn't know anything about it. All right. Let's see. Yep. Gold could be trust element when trust in the markets are lost. Yes. Yeah, well, then the story about the magic bullet and all that other stuff, that's nuts. But you see, just because, it doesn't mean you, see, just because you believe that there's some fishy business going on, doesn't mean you have to believe every theory. But people want to. They want to once they realize, oh, there's something fishy going on here. So, and I hate the Fed and I hate JP Morgan, so they both were involved. No, you need to do a little more research than just watching a YouTube video. Real Vision. Okay. Mexico wanted to make coins of pure silver that would trade with silver value. No, they didn't. No, that was Hugo Salinas Price wanted Mexico to do that. Mexico didn't want to do that. And in fact, if you listen to his interviews, he's frustrated that they didn't want to do it. It's a great idea. Basically, what he was saying is don't put a peso value on it. Just say it's an ounce. And then people will trade the silver. He's trying to remonetize silver without having it to be subject to a fiat currency. But Mexico didn't want that. That was what Hugo Salinas Price wanted, and he found no one wanted to do it. ANACAP is the only true moral-free approach, but Ron Paul is my favorite living America, says Persanti Girl. But Ron Paul was not an ANACAP. But you have to go to Rothbard for that. Even Mises wasn't. And Hayek certainly wasn't. All right. Checking out now RV. All right, Roger Henley. What is your Silver Doctors interview going live? I don't know. I did that interview on, then they put up the one on Palladium. Maybe I'll tell you what I said. Maybe they didn't like it. I said that the silver value is more driven and on the physical side by demand for silverware and jewelry. That's a fact. And that also that the main driver of silver demand is industry, and that demand is soft. And I said the investment demand is very weak. If they didn't like that, and that's why I don't think that's why they're not shy. It wasn't a controversial interview. They'll probably be up this week. If it's not, I'll put a protest in. Let's see. I'm sure I've asked this before. What is the real reason for the moniker Smaulgld? Is there a reason? I asked. No, there's no reason. I just putting words together. I always like the spelling of small, like small, tall, Paul, and I like gold, and I knew Smaulgld didn't make sense, so I just threw them together. Smaulgld. All right. Yes, the next bubble backed by real mugs, no energy wasted required. Prep for a mug standard. Can I get a gold mug? Well, they have. You can. In fact, if you go to the Zazzle store, you can get gold handle and a gold on the inside. I don't think it matches the and you order it through them. It comes out to be about the same with their shipping. When I wrap up the ones here, I have the classic and the super classic, and it's shipping included, priority shipping insured, $50, and that costs $19.99 and $23.99. If you order from them, it's like $16.99 plus their shipping, and you can change the colors on the label on the inside and on the handle if you wanted a gold one. You can get a silver one too, I think. I like to get it. They're so expensive to have made. I like to get a silver one. Okay, money is commodity, says White Space Marines. That is correct. A person wants food, sex, water, etc. To control these things is to have power. Paper notes printed by the Fed is only a bluff. Yes, but it's a legally enforced bluff because they're spending their power, spreading their power. Correct. Slowly takes off the tinfoil hat. Lincoln was killed because of the greenbacks. That's possible too, but we don't know that. But again, it goes to the point that he was issuing. Here's the thing. People try to say, well, the Federal Reserve money is debt-based and therefore it's bad. But if the U.S. Treasury just issued money like U.S. notes, that's fine. It's really not. It's just as inflationary, and it would be just as abused. We saw the Continentals in the Revolutionary War. They just printed up a bunch of money. It was worthless. The Civil War on both sides was fought by just printing up cash. So it's not like if you didn't have debt-based Fed money that you wouldn't have wars. They would print up their own currency, and they did. That's what Lincoln did. He didn't borrow the money. He just printed it. So I don't know if he was killed because of that, but La Plata Plique. Did you see the theory in JFK's killing being associated with accidental discharge from a Secret Service man's AR-15? No, I didn't. That's interesting. I mean, there's what I like to do with conspiracy theories is is try to debunk the ones that you can debunk, and not say you can't prove it didn't happen. So the thing about the Fed as a culprit, or people working for the Fed, there's enough on the record to show that they didn't have a motive. He was actually working to get rid of the silver certificates and replace them with Federal Reserve notes. And that whole red herring about the U.S. notes is a red herring. He didn't introduce U.S. notes. They came out in series every 10 years or so. It was his turn to issue them. It was no big deal. He wasn't issuing a threat to the Fed. FMJ's, yeah, that is really weird. That video, that's a Gruber video. Running a country is not brain surgery, says White Space Marines. No, it's not, but it does require moral and integrity, as Ron Paul is saying. File the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, period. Yeah, it sounds simple, you're right, but they don't do it. So you can't expect them to institute a gold standard and stick with it. Yeah. If politicians leave office with more money than they left with, then they did cheat the American people. You should actually, it should be a sacrifice to go into government. That you're doing service, government service, public service. You're not supposed to go be a congressman for 10 years, come out with more money than you went in, and then get all these deals lobbying your former colleagues in Congress. If Fed had mandatory audits, it would correct a lot of issues. Yes, indeed. The idea that somehow you can just we need to be independent. No, that means you get to do what you want when no one's looking. That's not being independent. Unbelievable that they get away with